Welcome to Immediate Immersion Live, where we're all about comprehension-based instruction in the modern language classroom. My name is Scott, and today we're going to be talking about some expert CI tips, and we'll be right back. And welcome back. And why do we have all this on our screen? Let me go ahead and clear it off. Sorry about that. Bear with me just 1 second. Gone and gone. Okay. Oh, I need to move over a little bit because my face is all being squished over there. Anyway, so today, welcome. This is our last live broadcast for the 2023 year. We'll be back in the, the 8th? I believe it's the 8th of January. It is the first Monday after the holiday. We'll be back. Today we're on for a special day because something came up yesterday and I wasn't able to be live. But here we are today. And we're going to be talking about all kinds of things about expert CI tips. Because so many of you, I have found out, that are watching me have been doing CI for quite a bit and are looking for some things to take it to the next level. The first thing that I want to talk about are challenges. I'm going to still move my chair over a little bit here, are the challenges that we face with comprehensible input. There are so many of these that we face. I am lucky that at a school that I teach at, we only hire teachers who are already trained and will implement CI, or are willing to get trained and implement CI. If they don't implement CI, they won't be rehired for the next year. So that makes one of the challenges easier for us, because we don't have to face the challenge of having to work with traditional teachers and then CI teachers. And sometimes there's a professional conflict that happens there, that we have different philosophies on how to instruct our students, and sometimes that can cause conflict. So I have been lucky. I only had to deal with that my first 4 years of teaching, but then after that, I was able to find schools that only taught with CI, and it made that part of the challenge very difficult. That one is not always easily surmountable, so that we need to think about that in as we go through. There's so many different ways to help mitigate that. And we just don't have time today to talk about all of those different things. If that's something that you would like to see, how to mitigate working with traditional teachers at the same time as CI teachers, throw up a like, and that will let me know that's something that you're interested in. But that's one of the challenges. Another challenge that we face with CI is implementing enough comprehensible input in our classrooms on a regular, consistent basis. That means speaking upwards of 90% of the target language in the classroom. But not only that, it has to be comprehensible or it defeats the whole purpose. And so I know that's one of my biggest challenges, is staying in the target language as much as possible. Because sometimes I'll delve into an explanation in English and then forget to go back. And sometimes it's just easier to stay out of it than to go back into it. And so I do a lot of variety of different things that to challenge myself. I have students help me stay on track and stay in the target language, because that's a really big one for me. One of my challenges. Another challenge is if you are one of the few CI teachers at your school, or maybe even the only one, and your students aren't used to it, having them transition. Many of them feel safer filling out worksheets because they can do it privately. So if they make a mistake, it's not public. And there's a right and a wrong answer that goes along with that. And so that makes it easier for them to be able to work through those things. However, CI based techniques put them at risk, or at least it puts them out there so that if they don't have full confidence in their skills, they're more hesitant and they would rather feel safe and comfortable than push outside the box a little bit. So you may have challenges with students winning them over to CI techniques. I'm just checking my notes to make sure I'm covering everything I want to cover here. The other challenge I have posted here is be with curriculum. If you have to work with a textbook, it may be more difficult to adapt that to comprehensible input because textbooks have a grammar timeline. They teach this grammar element, then this grammar element, and then that grammar element, and so on. And it goes in a concrete pattern. Where with CI, it's a more holistic, natural approach. We're not teaching past before present. We're not teaching, before future. We're not looking at that. We're using whatever language that we need to be able to use to make ourselves not only understood, but as grammatically correct as we know how. So that means we're teaching the tenses simultaneously and not in a chronological order like the textbook does. So there's a lot of challenges with trying to mesh them because inherently they both have two different philosophies. A textbook teaches things piecemeal, one thing at a time, and builds upon that, but it's in a very artificial way. It's not how we all learned our first language, and it's not how we're supposed to learn subsequent languages. Where comprehensible input is like we learned our first language. It's more natural, it's more holistic, and it doesn't follow we do this, then we do that, we teach this, then we teach that type of thing. Plus, comprehensible input isn't taught thematically because we don't teach our children the language thematically either. But textbooks are arranged in concrete themes that build upon each other. So what makes it difficult to merge these two philosophies is that their philosophies are so different from each other. They're built very, very differently. It's not impossible, but it's difficult to merge the two together. So those are our challenges. If anybody else has any challenges that they experience, feel free to put them in the comments. If you're watching it on the replay, please put them in the comments as well. I go back and I check them and I answer all of them as we go along. And let's go on to our next topic, which is the complexity barrier. So when we're trying to do things in comprehensible input, and again, I'm just looking at my notes here to make sure I'm covering everything. We have this constant battle with simplicity versus complexity. If we go too complex, we may lose students. So then we usually err on the side of being too simple. And usually that evolves in that we speak really slowly and we never adjust as kids progress. And we stay mainly in present tense and we stick away from anything else like past or future or subjunctive for those languages that have it. Excuse me. And then we also stick with short, choppy sentences. I had a few teachers over the years tell me, my kids are great, but they constantly write and speak only in short, choppy sentences. And then I always ask them, what are you using in classroom? Are you only speaking in short, choppy sentences? If so, how do you expect your students to be able to evolve beyond that if they never hear or see anything more than short, choppy sentences. Another teacher told me, it was one of the French teachers I worked with, she was really hesitant to go to CI because she was at the end of her career and didn't want to change everything up so close to the end. She fully believed in CI. The rest of us were all using CI. We were doing it in Japanese, in French. I'm sorry, not French. Japanese, German, and Spanish. She was the only one who wasn't, and she just was at the end of her career and said, it's not something that I want to change. She eventually did, but one thing she always said was, I have a very difficult time teaching the word but, the one that comes in the sentence. And I said, well, how often do you use that sentence in class? She goes, well, not very often. I go, that's why. If you're teaching holistic language, the word but comes up all the time. And I don't have to consciously teach it. It just comes out of what we're doing. So we have this constant battle with what we call the complexity barrier. We want to teach more complex language, but we don't know how in order to also keep it comprehensible. And so I like to call it the layered technique. So we layer our sentences together. There are short, medium, and long sentences. Our short sentences address our slower processors. Our medium sentences address the majority, the middle of the class. And then our long sentences address our top kids, our fast processors. We need to be doing all three and going back and forth amongst all three so that we are hitting every student along the way, from the lowest of the slow processors to the fastest of the fast processors. Now, the key to this is the layering. We cannot put information in a medium or a long sentence that wasn't already presented in a short, choppy sentence. That way, as we're building these sentences, we're not losing comprehension because we're not introducing anything new with them. We're just linking them together. Now, your medium sentences are going to have some detail, and they're going to usually be linked together with ands, buts, and ors. Your long sentences are going to be even more detailed, and they're going to be linked together with usually becauses, therefores, and sinces. So by doing this, we're addressing all layers of our classroom, and we're constantly scaffolding. And if you look, children's books do this. They either rely upon this method where they give out some short, choppy sentences and link them together to some medium sentences, then relink them together into longer sentences, or they rely on repetition of familiar phrases. Those would be, those common books like Brown Bear, The Hungry Caterpillar, The Little Red Hen, The Three Little Pigs. They're very repetitive. But then there are other stories that will layer upon layer. One of the stories that I taught in the beginning of my career, I no longer teach it anymore, is Pobre Anna, or Pauvre Anne, or Arme Anne. This book is not only repetitive, but it's beautiful in how it layers the sentences. It'll say something like, Anna is a girl. Anna is a normal girl. Anna has a lot of friends. Anna is a normal girl with a lot of friends. Anna lives in Torrance, California. Anna has a normal family. Anna lives in Torrance, California with a normal family. You see how it's layered? So if you ask a top kid if it's repetitive, they're going to say, oh my gosh, yes it is. But your mid kids will say, maybe a little, and your slower processors, they're going to say it's not repetitive at all. But you see how that's scaffolding the language. The short sentences are there to make sure it's comprehensible to everybody, but then they're building on the sentences with medium and longer sentences so that everybody has a goal to aspire to. They're being challenged at their particular level. Or, like as Krashen says, it's input plus one. What that plus one is different for every student. But by hitting short, medium, and long sentences regularly in the classroom, we are working really hard towards that plus one for every student. Speech rate, that's another one that we struggle with. In the beginning, we want to make sure in our level ones that we are enunciating every word clearly and that we are making appropriate pauses so that the words, the stuff can sink in. They have thinking time. That doesn't mean pausing between every word. Spanish and French ellipse the words together. French does it in writing as well, so you don't want to split up that part. So where the words get ellipsed together, we don't want to split that up so it's artificial. An example in Spanish is mijo. It really is mi, hijo, two words, but it's rarely spoken that way. It gets squished together into mijo. And so we don't want to put a pause in between there because it's not natural. So we put our pauses where they naturally would be, but they're extended a little bit longer than natural to let everything sink in, get kids to have processing time along the way. But we can't stay there. As the year progresses, we are slowly moving towards a more natural cadence. Now, for Spanish speakers, that does not mean we're moving towards a Cuban cadence. We are working slowly to a natural cadence, and we probably won't get there at level 1. It'll probably get there at the beginning of level 2. But we don't want to be at the same rate of speech that we were in the fall that we are in the spring. We want to make sure that we have that out separated. Other things that we have with the complexity barrier. Where else is here? Is making yourself more comprehensible. And we have to use all of the things that we have at our disposal to do that. So you've got visuals, so you can use pictures and videos. You can also use gestures and actions. Whatever you need to do, small drawings up there. And I know a lot of you are self-conscious about drawing. I know our French teacher is at my school. She says she's so embarrassed of her drawings. She won't hand draw anything. But I find the fun in that. We all laugh at my drawings. And so it's okay to have fun with that. Not all of us are gifted with the art of being able to draw things. So, but as long as you can make it understandable and work it out there and we can all laugh together, that helps with making it comprehensible. So that's the complexity barrier challenge that we are facing. So you want to make sure that you are constantly being comprehensible, but not to the point where you're sacrificing complexity, because you need to give them some place to be able to grow. Student engagement. We all know that student engagement is the key. We need to keep students engaged and motivated. One of the things that I was never taught as a middle school, high school teacher, and I learned from my sister, who's an elementary school teacher, is that you have to model the motivation you want to see in your students. Now, I guess I did this subconsciously without knowing it, but now I'm more conscious about it. And how it worked for me subconsciously was, I have rarely had first period prep. It's one of the worst preps for me. I don't like having first period prep. I don't even like having second period prep, which is what I have currently. I've had that for the last couple of years. I don't like it. I like my prep later in the day. I don't like it the last period of the day either. I know first and last period are usually really popular. That's not for me. I like mine in the middle towards the end. So, either right before lunch or right after lunch is perfect. So, um, but what I found was other teachers would always complain about their first period classes being sleepy. And I'm like, I have never, ever experienced a sleepy first period class. And I've been at schools where we started at 7 in the morning and I still never had it. And then I looked at what I was doing, and it's the way that I'm acting. I am loud and obnoxious in the morning. And it was subconscious to do it to liven up my class. I didn't even realize that's what I was doing. But when I was speaking with my sister, she says this is what elementary school teachers do every day throughout the day. Because they have the same kids almost the entire class period, they are constantly working with ebb and flow of motivation. If the kids come back from PE, they're all riled up. So they're going to do a calming activity right when they come back from PE. If they're coming from on the library where they've been all quiet and hushed up, now they need to do something a little bit more lively to get them motivated. So they call it the constant ebb and flow that they're having to work through to get that done. And so that's something that we do in our classrooms. So I know a lot of my kids come into class a little bit on the hyper, especially now that I have been teaching middle school for the past 10 years. So I like to start with silent reading on a lot of my days because that gives everybody a calming moment. Pardon me a second, I'm going to shut my door. My dog's barking. Ben, shh. Sorry about that. Working live with real live animals, sometimes difficult. So that's something that's really powerful to know the energy level. That's maybe better than motivation. The energy level of your students and adapting to what you're going to do. If I know that my kids have been taking tests, they have been doing tests for a long time. So let's say they're doing standardized tests, they're coming to class. They have been sitting and been quiet. I need to do something to energize them a little bit. If I know they've been coming for some rowdy activity, especially after lunch, we're going to start with a quieter activity to get them all working with that stuff. So you've got all those different things that you need to be working on a constant basis to keep that energy level, that motivation level high. Sorry, I'm adjusting a light here, and as I see, part of my screen is extremely dark. Ooh, there we go. So that's the things you want to think about with that part of student engagement. Another thing for student engagement that I learned from Alina Filipescu, she teaches in Southern California. She teaches Spanish, and she's an amazing CI teacher. If you ever get a chance to go to one of her workshops or hear her talk about anything, or just can grab her at lunch one time at a conference, do so. I highly recommend her. She's amazing. But one of the things that she does is she has these actions that she has kids do in response to things that she says. So, for example, when she uses the word secret in Spanish, whenever it comes up, the kids lean in and cup their ear. Whenever, what does she think? I'm trying to think of the ones, because I do different ones than she does. But she's got a whole list of different things, different actions that kids do in response to things that they say. So I use the secreto one whenever we do that. Oh, I do one whenever I say hay un problema or había un problema. Then my kids go, oh no, oh me, oh my. And then one of my groups of kids many years ago added a oh shucks kind of snap. So it went, oh no, oh me, oh my. They did that. So they added that part to it. But the key to this is find key things that get repeated a lot in class and assign an action, a reaction to those so that you know that your kids are paying attention because they are responding with these rote actions to what you're saying. Another one I say, I'll go, comprenden or entienden, do you understand? And then they all will respond, sí, entendemos. Yes, we understand. So we're always having this, like, it's a call and response, but it's not for classroom management per se. It's for student engagement, to keep them engaged in what we're doing. It's a really effective thing. You don't want to overdo it, so you're not always moving around at every moment with every word that you say. But things that you're saying quite often, find actions, gestures, or verbalizations that they can do in response there so that they are showing that they are more engaged. Let's see, anything else in there? Yes. And this is just a core part of CI as well. Is always, you are always looking for talking about things that the kids are interested in. That's how you keep them in the language as much as possible. If you're talking about what they want to talk about, they're willing to stay with you in the target language longer than if you're talking about what you want to talk about in the target language. They're not necessarily willing to give you that attention long enough for them to acquire the language. So it's a constant focus on personalizing and talking about what kids want to talk about. I'm always changing my stories and putting, the stories don't change themselves necessarily, but every year I change the names in my stories to the current names of kids in my classroom. It helps personalize it. I do the same thing with my quizzes. Now, sometimes I'll write a brand new story or I'll adjust the story I have because I know this particular student does this particular thing, maybe plays baseball or checkers or whatever they do, and I'll add that in so it's a little bit even more personalized than just using their names. But by doing those things, I get kids to want to pay attention. And I get kids who go, when's the next quiz? And can I be in it? When does that ever happen? And that happens because we are personalizing our content to the kids in front of us, and we are incorporating the things that they want to talk about. For conversations, years ago, we had a battle. It was the Fortnite years for the boys, and it was Riverdale for the girls. So on Conversation Day, which was Mondays for me, we would have these battles where the kids wanted to talk, the boys wanted to talk about Fortnite, but the girls did not. And the girls wanted to talk about the TV show Riverdale, but the boys did not. So what do? We compromised. So we alternated. Every other Monday was either Fortnite Monday or Riverdale Monday. And then that way I got the kids involved. Did I want to talk about either of those? I did not. But they wanted to, and I got higher level student engagement because we were talking about what they wanted to talk about. So that's another thing that you can do to help engage them. I move quickly away from weekend talk because it gets really rote and boring. Kids don't really change up what they talk about. So I find other things to talk about, and this is one of the ways that I did that. Do any of you have any ways that you personalize or increase student engagement? Let me know in the chat. Or if you're watching this on the replay, put them in the comments and I'll be happy to talk about them. The next thing I want to talk about today would be the different proficiency levels. For most of us, we separate kids based on the level. Are they level 1? Are they level 2? Are they level 3? Are they level 4? I had a teacher in our assessment academy that just ended last weekend, or 2 weekends ago, actually. Um, and they don't do level 1, level 2. They do 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade. So, if not in 9th grade, they might have had someone who's been in language for 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, but they might also have someone who just transferred into the school, never had language before, so it's their first year, all in the same class. And that's a really difficult thing to address. It's at the extreme. But even if we look at our classes that are divided by levels, we have this within those levels as well. We have top level 1 students and low level 1 students. We have top level 2 students and low level 2 students. So we need to address all of their needs, and we need to do that with different proficiency levels. We need to challenge our fast processors while at the same time keeping it comprehensible for our slower processors and challenging them at their own pace. And so we talked a little bit about this with the complexity barrier when we talked about layering the sentences, the short, medium, and long sentences. But that's not the only things that can be done. Addressing more modalities. We all as teachers have a preference for the modality we like to teach the most, and students have their preference for the modality that they like to learn the most. But we all benefit from all of the different modalities. As human beings, generally speaking, most of our the way we experience the world comes from vision. But there are kids who will say they're not visual learners. So that doesn't mean that we're now not going to teach them with any visual elements, but we just need to include some of the other elements as well. So the more modalities that we can incorporate in our classroom, we not only address the different proficiency levels, but we may also address different, what's the word I want to use? Special need levels that we may have in our classrooms. If we have kids with 504s or IEPs, using more modalities helps them as well. So find ways to incorporate sound, kinesthetic actions and gestures and movement, visuals, video, images, drawings, other senses. You can even try to incorporate smells. Like if you're teaching some cultural unit about, like right now in Spanish, get ready for the Christmas time, Las Posadas. You can bring in a rosca de reyes cake, and they can smell that, then they can taste it. Bringing all those different things in there to support the language learning really, really helps and makes it scaffolding for all the different proficiency levels. So using those different modalities. Also talking with other teachers and finding different ways that they address these different proficiency levels in the class. What are they doing to help that every student is being successful at their particular level? And talk to students. Find out what works for them and what doesn't. Now, take it with a grain of salt, because anything that's got work attached to it, many kids are going to say, oh yeah, I don't like that. Don't do that anymore. So take it with a grain of salt. But I have kids do a lot of reflections, and they do them in English so they can really voice what the topic is. But I get a lot of feedback from things that we're doing in class that I would never have gotten if I hadn't asked the questions. So I ask questions like, how did this activity work for you? What worked for you in it, or what didn't work for you? And explain why, because the why is where the insights come from. Or I'll say, which activities this year have you learned the most from? Which have you learned the least from? And explain why. Because again, the why is where the insights come from. So all of these different types of things can really, really help you address the different proficiency levels in class. Writing vocabulary on the board. Now, we've all been taught this, to do this and to use different colors, one color for target language, one color for the translation. We all know this. I don't know about you, but I get sloppy as I start writing. So I'll start off neat, but as my board gets filled up, it gets sloppier. Plus, I run out of board room. And so I'm squeezing the words in here and squeezing the words in there. So what I have chosen to do, instead of writing it up on the board, is I will create a Google Doc. And I will split the doc into 2 columns. So I'll make a table with 2 columns. I'll highlight one column and tell it that I want that to be one color. And then I highlight the other column and I tell it I want it to be a different color. So now I don't have to think about the color changes. I just type in the right column, the target language in the first column, the translation in the second column, and the colors automatically change. And this gives me a running list of vocabulary words that I'm using to make them comprehensible. Now, I tell my kids this is not a vocab list to go home and memorize. I do share it with them, but I constantly tell them that's not what it's for. Though there are kids, the top kids, who will go home and memorize every single word. What it is, it's a way to make me comprehensible without me having to resort to English and stop the flow. Because as we talked about in the beginning, if I do that too much, it's harder for me to transition back to the target language. But if I'm only translating using the written board, my Google Doc, then I don't have that problem of going back and forth between English and Spanish and English. So it works better for me. Plus, I have something I can give absent students. But again, I tell them all this is for is so that you can understand what I'm saying when I'm saying it. If it's something you're going to need to know, it's going to get naturally repeated over and over in the natural progress of class over many classes. So you won't even have to think about it. You'll automatically know it because I've naturally just repeated it. It becomes high frequency, or it's high frequency because it's used frequently. And I don't have to really try. So those are my ways of addressing the different proficiency levels in there. And scaffolding, my biggest one is that short, medium, and long sentences, and my Google Doc with the vocabulary that helps make them comprehensible for everything. Now, in the beginning, in level 1, I am writing down every word, every version of the. So in Spanish, we've got 4. We've got masculine, feminine, and then masculine plural and feminine plural. In German, we have like over a dozen thes, depending on whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter. We have a third gender, but also the role that the plays in the sentence. Is it a subject the? Is it a direct object the? Is it an indirect object the? Is it a possessive the? So we've got these, what we call cases, 4 cases, 3 genders. And then you get the plural on top of that. So you've got 4 different types of thes plus the 4 cases, which can give you dozens of combinations in there. So every single one of those gets written down. But as the school year progresses, I'm writing down less and less. If I think they know it, I'm not writing it down unless some kid raises their hand and asks, and then I will. So keep that in mind. In level 1, at the very beginning, for the first few weeks, you're writing down nearly every single word. But as the year progresses, you're writing down less and less. Lastly, let's go ahead and talk about a supportive learning environment. This is important in any class that is taught, whether it's math, PE, English, science, it doesn't matter. But it's even more important when the language of instruction is not the common language that is understood in the school. It's one thing that you don't understand math, but you do understand the language that math is being taught in. It's another thing that you don't understand Spanish and you don't understand the language that it's being taught in because it's being taught in Spanish. It makes things more complex. So we need to be really deliberate in providing a supportive learning environment. And one of the first ways that I do that is I allow them and let them know from day one it is 100% okay to make mistakes. No worries whatsoever. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes is where we learn. We never learn from things that we already know how to do. We learn from things when we make mistakes, and you learn how to fix that mistake. And so mistakes are a part of the learning process. But kids are really reluctant to make mistakes in front of their peers because they're afraid of ridicule. So I make sure right away that we do not make fun of students based on their speaking or writing or language abilities. And we do not laugh if they make a mistake. We are being very supportive of everything that they do. And that means I celebrate when they use the target language, even if it wasn't used at all correctly, because I want to encourage them to use it more. Because how are they going to get better if they don't use it, if they hinder it? And I loved my college German teacher to the end of the earth. She was amazing. But when it came to speaking German out loud, inadvertently, she was not very supportive. She thought she was being, because she would correct us mid-sentence in how to say it, get the endings right, all of those kinds of things. But the result was not what she was trying to do. It didn't make us feel supported. It made us feel self-conscious. And so none of us wanted to speak in the class for fear of our errors being, aired out like dirty laundry. So I don't point out kids' errors. I will, give them a high five. I will applaud them when they use the language, no matter how many mistakes they made. And then we do what Susie Gross has nicknamed like mommy talk, where we rephrase what they say correctly. So an example in English would be, if a kid said, "me want cookie," we understood what the kid was saying, and now we're going to celebrate because the kid used the words. They used their words to express what they wanted, and that was important. But it wasn't grammatically correct, and so we can't let it stand. But if we say that's not how we say it, "I want a cookie." Me is an object pronoun and can't start a sentence. You do all that, you're going to shut the kid down. So you just rephrase, "Oh, you want a cookie. I want a cookie too." And doing this over and over again, over a period of time, it will be self-corrected, because they will have not been hearing people say, "me want cookie." They're hearing more people say, "I want cookie," and they'll realize subconsciously that's how it's said, and they'll do that. That's how you're supportive while still giving them the feedback they need to speak more correctly. And you have to foster that growth mindset, that you guys are right here at the beginning and you got a long way to go, and it's going to be a slow process. But if you keep on working at it, you will get better each and every day. The first day of a sports season is your worst day. And every day through the season, you're going to get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And at the end of the season, you're going to be better than you were at the beginning of the season. It may not be a huge amount better, depending on where your skills are and where you're at, but you will be better. And so in the beginning of anything that you learn, where you start here and where you end here are bigger jumps. You're growing a lot faster. Just like babies physically grow faster when they're younger, and then they get to a point where it starts to slow down. It's the same thing with learning things. Once you get to a certain point, you're still learning things. It's just at a slower pace and might not be as noticeable. Another example, hair. When I shave my head to this buzz cut, it's really noticeable in a week when it starts to grow out. But if I had longer hair, a week's worth of growth would not be as evident. And so it's the same way, and you have to stress that with kids so that they know that they, however fast that they're learning, that's the perfect speed. Let's see. Another thing you can do is work with your colleagues, whether you're doing it in a professional learning community, or you attend workshops, or you are on Facebook groups or something like that. Talk about how the different ways that you can support your students in their learning and make them feel comfortable. It's one of the hypotheses by Stephen Krashen, the affective filter hypothesis, that kids can't learn if their affective filter is raised. And affective filter is a really big word, and I just call it stress. So as long as the kid's stress level is high, they're less likely to acquire language. We need to work to make that stress level as low as possible. Well, how do we do this? We make kids feel comfortable in class. We talk about topics that they want to talk about. We make sure that we're being comprehensible. We make classes fun and lighthearted as possible. All of these things help lower the stress level so that they're willing to make the mistakes and learn from them as we go along. It's really, really important to keep that affective filter as low as possible, that stress level as low as possible. So those are the things that I want to talk about ways that you can up your CI, and you're thinking now beyond just the basics of CI, beyond just the basics of providing vocabulary, conversations, stories, and reading texts, that you can work with that by addressing the challenges that we all face in the classroom, by working that complexity barrier, that we are not staying simple all the time, that we are working to make our language more complex while still keeping it comprehensible. How to work on making our students more engaged in the language, because we might have some success with just going through those four stages of vocabulary, conversation, stories, and reading, but we can take it a notch higher by getting kids more engaged in what they're learning. And then addressing the different proficiency levels that we have in all of our classrooms, and providing that supportive learning environment to support every student so they can be successful at their particular level. So if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. Or again, if you're watching this on the replay, feel free to go ahead and put them in the comments. Also, I want to let you know, and I'll type it here for everybody, we have a completely free CI proficiency quiz that you can take at, let me finish here, HTTPS, there we go. And I'll put it up on the screen. Here you go. That you can take to find out, where are you in your CI proficiency journey? Are you just at the CI curious stage? You're just learning about CI? Are you at the beginning stages, intermediate, or are you advanced? So take the quiz. You'll get a personalized feedback and steps that you can take to go even further in your CI journey. So I highly recommend you take advantage of that. With that, as I said, we won't be live for the holidays. So next week is Christmas, and then after that, it is New Year's, and we'll be back the first Monday after New Year's, which I believe is the 8th of January. So with that, I will say goodbye to everybody. I hope everybody has a great holiday season, however you celebrate and with whomever you celebrate. And with that, I'll say goodbye and we'll end it out here. Everybody have a great rest of the holiday season and great winter break, because ours starts after tomorrow. Have a good one, everybody.